We're all about the German puns today.
Does anybody want to give this anything other than good before we start talking about it?
Yeah, that's basically what I was going to say. I don't think we can give it anything but a good, because they do an excellent job of making you, much like in Dark Souls, feel like you are experiencing a new world that doesn't quite follow the same rules as ours.
Yeah, the game is very much about learning how the world works as you explore it, and being unforgiving while it does it. Though apparently I was a god. That's just what chat. That's just what chat was going. I'm just going by chat. Some guy came into chat like, "You're a god." I was like, "I guess."
I like video games.
My experience was, I don't know about a god, but I've played some games before. I like games. I think that was my actual answer. But it was absolutely good world building. The world is alive. A big period. That's a sentence. Period. No, come on, keyboard. Come on, keyboard. There we go. A big part of the world. You can tell my hands are still just a little bit getting into tune with this keyboard. A big part of the world is learning and exploring it and discovering things. Discovering. There we go. Things for yourself.
Keyboard.
Yes, new keyboards do that. I think the stomach is also throwing me off. Do you have anybody have anything to, you've seen the game, Rubido. What did you think of the world building? From a viewer's standpoint, Pseudo, you didn't play the game either. From a viewer's standpoint, what did you get out of the world building?
I thought it was well done. I was it's a bit different when, of course, you're viewing it rather than playing it, because you don't have the kind of control, right? You're getting more of the provide a narrative experience. But even just from that lens, it was, I thought they did a really good job. I was intrigued with what is going on. I thought, the actual set design of everything was really nice. The way everything was presented and just like its own, it had its own taste. And I found at least recently, when a lot of people try to, when they attempt to go for that Souls-like tag, they fall flat in this area. They really just kind of focus on the combat rather than what actually really goes into a Souls, like is the world and the atmosphere that you use those mechanics in.
I'm glad you brought up it's more than the combat, because so many people really think of Souls-like as it's hard combat.
And that is a characteristic of FromSoft games. But it's so much more than that to be something akin to Dark Souls.
Level design is key. Super key. It's just so much more. But because so many people think just combat when they think Soulsborne or Souls-like, when they go to make a Souls-like, all they work on is the combat. Well, some of them may have some really good combat. It misses out on so many other aspects that make a complete game. I love when games can drop in items / atmosphere that tell more of a story than it telling you through dialogue, and this game does it well like Dark Souls. And the story, from what I've seen, looked good. Yes, the story is very, very cool. I don't know nearly enough about it. Pookie dove very deep into it, and maybe she'll drop some knowledge bombs on us while we're talking about it. Especially in this area while we talk about characters.
Which is also a very interesting point in this game, because there's a very constrained cast.
Yes.
But the characters that are available are quite well done.
And intriguing.
And the way that you pick up your new shells also introduces characters, which is super fucking cool.
I really love the tie-in of leveling up your shell and learning about its personality. The more information you get about who your shell was in the past, the more powerful the shell becomes. And they did it with a fairly simple interface. Just unlock the ability, reveals some information about the character in a very simple, intuitive, done many, many times before kind of way, used in a totally unique and original way to start evolving story for individual characters. Also, it kind of... Go ahead.
I was just going to say that's something that we've touched on before, is when you're making a new game, you don't necessarily want to do like 80% new stuff.
Yeah.
You just want the 5 to 10% new stuff. And that's precisely what they did with their character development, and it worked very, very well.
Yeah. I really like the narrow scope they kept with the characters too. Like you were saying, they don't have a lot, but they fleshed out what they had. We all know it's a small team. It's a small budget. Very small budget. Wasn't a very expensive game in the world of game creation. Make a unique experience, not a new experience. I like that wording. That's very well put. Very well put.
Yeah, that's right on. It doesn't need to be unique. Doesn't always mean new. And I mean, you can have something that you've done all the time before, but if you put a unique spin on it or have a fresh take on it, even though it's something you're used to, it can still be something that is not. It is like fresh, and it can be still like pulled into it and still feel like it's new, even though maybe under the hood it really isn't. I think this game did that pretty well, especially like I really like what they did with the shells, and I really liked how like you get more proficient with them. It's because you're learning more about them, and you're kind of developing that kind of weird relationship of what's kind of going on with them, and you're getting a bit more personal. I thought that was great. I also liked how they kept the scope good for them. Like it would have been a lot easier, they have all these. I'm sure when you're designing these things, there's that whiteboard was probably filled with all these cool ideas for shells that could have been in the game, and they could have just put a whole lot in. But I'm glad they went with the quality over quantity as well. Have the bunch that are there, but have them flushed out and really good and really really well done and designed and tweaked, rather than having a whole lot to choose from, but only having still 5 that are actually viable.
Yeah, they went for a depth approach rather than a breadth approach, and I think it really shines through in this game.
Definitely. I also added in as a little note that they managed to make the world still feel full with only a handful of characters. Like you don't feel like you're in this empty, forsaken nothingness. There's still people around. There's still stuff. There's still everything. There's people even helping you. They got the merchant. They got
They definitely did capture the soul's loneliness.
Yes.
Though.
Yes, it's lonely, but it's not empty. Which it already sounds difficult to do. Yeah. Like if you just come to something like make a world that feels lonely, but it's not empty, you're gonna be like,
Man,
I'm gonna need to put
you
some
guys.
thought into this one. Yeah, it's tough. Yeah, it is, and they really really nailed it. They really really did. And on to storyline.
So this is where we could use some lore bombs from Pookie. So if Pookie's got some lore to throw our way, that would be great. Because I don't honestly fully understand the storyline of this game.
Yeah, I don't. I kind of do. So the person we play is sort of, unlike Shadow of the Colossus, it feels more empty than lonely. Yeah, well said. A nice comparison. So who we play in this game, we are like Crucix, basically, and all of them. We're one of those 3. And there's this deep story of, I'm not sure exactly how it all works, but when we're going and yeah, see, I'm already lost. That's basically what I know from Pookie, is just that we as an entity were like one of those great defenders, protectors. They're actually protecting the revered. Yes, they're protecting the revered, or they are the revered. I thought they protected the revered, which is the women that we're ripping the gland out of after we've defeated the protector. And those things with the glands, they are guardians. Yeah, okay, the revered is what you're pulling the glands out of, and the bosses are guardians. And we're a revered? So we're like one of the things we're pulling the glands out of, not the guardians, or are we a guardian?
You're just like, fuck you, all the glands are for me.
Yeah, just stacking that power.
Slash Birdman.
Yeah. And then the giant sea chicken has been, consuming and defeating and, kind of gaining power despite being locked there. And that's why you got to fight him at the end. But I think it's really interesting to analyze the storyline not from a perspective of where we've researched it and know it all, but have just played it once.
Yeah, and kind of judge the methods that was used to kind of deliver it and how much was there versus, how much has to be kind of sought out. Not that there's anything kind of wrong with that, but it can be kind of hard to put that or to, assign a good or bad to, how much was delivered versus how much is, up to the player to go and find and interpret from themselves.
Yeah, I agree. And if its depth makes it good, it still deserves a good. But it's interesting to talk about if you're just coming and playing the game for a first time, what sort of experience can you actually expect out of the story? And I don't know about
an incomplete one, I think.
Well, yeah, an incomplete one, but I didn't get a negative experience out of the story still. You know what I mean?
See, that's what I was going to say is we often have negative connotations around the word incomplete, but it's incomplete in the same way the story that Dark Souls delivers to you is.
Yep.
It's incomplete in a way that encourages you to find out more. It evokes a sense of wonder, a sense of like dark whimsy where you're just like, oh my God, this is amazing. I want to learn more about this.
I think you hit the nail on the head with the sense of wonder. I think that's key to a hidden storyline. If you're making the character dig and research and think and find the story this way before it's going to truly make sense, then, it has to have that intrigue value. It has to pull them in. It has to make them say, I want to know more, or it's not going to work. It's just going to be a bunch of people going, oh, that story was dumb. It had nothing in it. And you're never going to bother looking for the rest. So without that, I think that sense of wonder is essential to these types of stories getting an okay or a good. If you don't have that wonder, it's just a bad story.
I can't remember. Was there there's not really? There's kind of just the main kind of path you take. Is there not really like side stuff you do in this?
There is no main path. There is no main path. That's the thing in this game. There's 3 bosses, and you explore the world and find them in your own order.
Yeah. Okay. Because I was going to say, usually in games where there's no linear narrative, it doesn't really mean it's bad, because it doesn't mean it just means it's not a traditional structure.
Yeah.
But as long as the content there is still good, I mean, it's still up to the player to go in that order and kind of find things out. But it doesn't mean it doesn't have a bad story. It just means it's delivered differently.
Yeah.
And there's games that can have this and still have them be bad. I'm trying to think of some examples. I could probably rip on Bethesda a bit, but I'll try to stop that. But there's a lot of games that have that. They'll have weaker kind of driven narratives, but they'll be like, oh, we have an open world that you explore. There's stuff to find, and you're like, okay, well, I read dialogue in a book that doesn't really do much or link together, right? But in these games, everything is kind of intertwined, and the effort is there, and you're rewarded by that experience. So I still think that on that level, the story that's there, even though it's not a traditional, you start here, middle here, end here for every player, the medium of the story that is there, I think, can still be good.
I strongly agree. Strongly agree. My only point was that if you don't have that sense of wonder to encourage them to look into the story, it's not going to be a good experience or story. Because you're probably never going to learn anything more about it, and you may have done a fantastic story under the hood. It could be incredible if people knew what it was, but if they never want to know what it is, and it's not ever given to them, then it's just not good, right?
Yeah. So I think it depends on how easily available it was and how much was put there, and how common it would be for the common playthrough to actually pull any of that story out and kind of have an understanding of what's going on, rather than kind of leaving it out there and hoping for that small subset of players to find everything and put the pieces together, and then say to anyone who doesn't agree with it, well, you just didn't put in the effort. So I think there's a middle ground, because there's also like traditional narratives. Like you can play a game like Yakuza, which have, you know, fantastic narratives, but not pay attention to it at all and just do the action parts, and then come on, and at the end of it and be like, well, you know, in any medium that gives a story, it kind of is still on the player to how much attention you're giving. You have to put, right? But for most linear stories, you don't usually have to put that much attention, and then for some of these ones, you have to put quite a bit of attention. But I think a bar falls on like how much is actually needed. Like, do you have to analyze every little thing? If you don't look at one item or read one description, does it not make sense anymore? Like how much, where is that bar at for how much effort do you need to put in to be able to, you know, have the understanding what's going on and have, you know, an intrigue into the story?
I don't think there's a bar for the story being too complex and too hard to find. The main thing is that the intrigue level has to meet that bar.
Yeah.
Like I'm thinking, my first example obviously is always Bloodborne. It's a super cryptic, hard to understand story that you can spend weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks researching and miss an item that happens to have an important piece of text that changes your entire opinion about like a period of time and how it all unraveled. That's pretty complex, but the intrigue level is so high that you don't mind spending that time. You want to. It's almost like a reward in itself, finding out the story at that point.
Yeah, I think what I meant by bar is like the effort, like how out of the way are these kind of things. An example of a game I play is Breakpoint. It's got a lot of the narrative stuff is kind of delivered through evidence you find. You've kind of got multiple kind of quests going on, and you've had to find evidence to kind of push these narratives forward, and you have to read them and consult them and stuff like that. And they're insanely tedious to get. You have to basically raid military bases and pick them up and then read them, which is kind of fun, but some of them are just like out of the way, and it's optional and it's fine, but like they don't do a whole lot for you. And it's like sometimes like a 10 to 15 minute helicopter ride just to, you know, get a bit of narrative with no action in it, rather than, you know, having it be in a place that, you know, is a bit more linear. You can explore it. If you want to pick up the items and read them, you can. If you want to go through that, you can, but you don't have to, you know, basically spend hours just not doing anything besides just trying to find items.
The extra items you're getting in that game, is that like side story details, or is that actually explaining the main core of what's going on in the game?
Both.
Okay, that's interesting.
It's not it's okay. It's not fantastic, and it's super easy just to ignore them, and then you have like not really any idea what's going on, and it kind of forces you sometimes to like the Breakpoint's a weird case study, because they basically, what happened is they launched with a bunch of different game design ideas from their game Wildlands that everyone was used to, and then of course everyone was like, what the hell, we wanted, you know, Wildlands 2. They launched with like no quest markers. They give you a vague idea of where things are. The game was quite a bit harder, which is like, it's fine. It's a gameplay style. You have to read through like the evidence you find and kind of break down, okay, well, where is this evidence? Well, this person's being held at a compound. Well, we kind of know it's here. We can go talk to some people there and they'll tell us where it is. But then like a couple months later, they're like, okay, people don't like it. So then they patched back in the quest markers. So now you have both. So now you have quest markers to go right to where the evidence is to pick it up. And then you lose that kind of, like I said, that intrigue of like, I need to find out what's going on and explore the place, and it'll reveal to me what's going on. Now it's, I show up and I go to the arrow and it tells me, but it could have just, you know, saved me the 20 minutes. So that it's kind of that in between, where I find like most Souls, like, you know, if you want to find out what's going on, you need to pay attention. It's not going to tell you what's going on and hold your hand, and that way you can keep that intrigue and kind of, you know, keep going forward. But, you know, it's not also for everyone. That game was really weird, because it's a third-person shooter action game, and the last thing you want to be doing is kind of crawling around documents reading a bunch of stuff. It's a, you know,
I was going to say that style reminds me more of like a, you know, a Deus Ex kind of idea, where you've got this main story being fed to you, and then you've just got fluff everywhere in the world where you can go and read it for extra details about everything. But it's not usually like main story. It's more contextual information for the world and whatnot, side bits.
Yeah. So I think, like for Breakpoint story, it's like I said, it's one of those things where it depends on how much you know, the effort you put into to figure it out. And it's not a terrible story that's there, and they do give you cutscenes here and there, but I'd say that they're the most would be an okay just from the medium it delivered. But I think, you know, in the same style, a lot of the Souls likes, you know, just because it takes that effort, I think they can still be, you know, a rewarding experience. And as long as you're not having to put in, too much effort for it, where, the story is just hidden under all the stuff and it's frustrating to get to, then I think there's no problem in giving it a good, just because it doesn't have a linear narrative.
So
Yeah, for sure.
So basically what you're saying is VODI makes Dark Souls story good.
No, I think it's the core tenet of what should be designed into a Souls-like game, and I think Mortal Shell did a very good job of this. Is difficult, but fair.
Yeah. Also, just as a side note, my level's working properly in OBS now.
Yay! We don't know why, but it is.
I haven't even I haven't even restarted the program. I don't know. Yours are broken now?
Yeah, mine don't go above -60 dB in my levels. They just flash colors.
Wow.
Okay. Your ghost has transferred over the net into my machine, apparently.
All right. Well, let's talk about performance before the whole stream dies then.
So performance on my machine, granted it is fairly powerful, though using a mid-range GPU was quite good.
Yeah, I had super constant frames. I crushed the game, and I was running OBS on the side the whole time with the exact same mid-range GPU, the 5700 XT overclocked, and I'm running an 8700K Intel chip. That ran great. And that's not a smoking top-of-the-line super system or anything like that.
I think if I recall correctly, Lobos had some weirdness getting it to run properly on his 4K monitor, but whatever.
4K is hard.
Yeah, I was doing it in 1440. So we got good frames in 1440p on a 700 XT and a decent i7 while running OBS. Frames were constant, minimal droppage. I don't remember any frame drops on bosses or anything like that because you would have noticed.
Yeah, you would. For the style of the game, like constant frames is almost more important than having like a higher frame that fluctuates. Because if your frame timings are off, you're gonna have a real bad time. You want to be as close to locked as you can.
Yeah, Bloodborne runs at 30 FPS and is completely playable at 30 FPS. It's fine. I mean, I'd love 60
on the PS4 Pro.
On the PS4 Pro. On the PS4 Pro, they locked it to 30 frames for that reason, though. And it keeps it consistent and smooth, and you can play the game without wanting to, pull your hair out if you're on a Pro. Don't play it on a normal.
The experience on the OG PS4 is not nearly as good. Lots of drops, sub 20 FPS.
And that'll kill you. Almost every time that'll kill you. This is specifically for PC, but I'm interested because Pookie played it on the PS4 Pro. How was the performance? Do you remember any frame drops or any issues like that? Or like stutter and slow down? Or was it nice and smooth and fast the whole time?
Because frame timing is really important too for these kind of games.
Yes.
Not just like a constant frames per second, but you got to make sure that the time between frames is smooth. Like if your game takes like 0.9 seconds to render one frame, but then renders the rest of the 59 in 0.1 seconds after it, that's not going to be a smooth experience, even though you're still technically getting 60 FPS.
Which is why average frames do not tell the whole story for hardware reviews or game reviews.
Yeah, and then you also see that sometimes with people, you'll see that like when you usually play games on PC and you'll be at like 30 frames, it feels so much worse than playing games on consoles at 30 FPS, and that's typically because consoles are so optimized that your frame times are so minimal. And if you're playing a game on a PC where your frames are 30 FPS, it's usually because your PC is probably struggling. And if you look at your frame times, they're going to be kind of all over the place. And if they're not consistent, that's when you start feeling that jitteriness, even though your frames can be locked.
Yeah. So animation. Let's hear from the people that just watched it first, because this is one that you can definitely comment on. What did you think of the animation? Rubido, Pseudo, rest of chat.
I really like the bosses. I thought they were like really, really well done. Those they were cool, and I think it's a really important part of this style of game too. Like they they were really cool. I really enjoyed the direction they took with them. I can't remember names at all. I just remember one of the fire guys.
Crucix.
Yeah.
Crucix with the little twin.
Yeah, and just like with like, you know, it's technically the two of them, right? And how they work together with that, and just their attack animations, and then of course the player animations as well, with the different shells and even like the hardening mechanic. I thought everything was pretty well done.
And just to touch on the hardening mechanic, I know we're going to be getting more deep into it during the mechanics section.
If we can get there.
The way that the hardening mechanic played through the other animations that you're seeing was so good.
They had some crazy animation keyframe working in order to be able to harden at any point and just freeze and hang and wait. There was some quality programming going on there.
Faux show.
It is hard to sync that stuff up, even just without having to pause it halfway through.
Yeah.
And then let alone like, oh, we can pause at any time and then just go. It's like, oh, damn.
Yeah. I love the animation when you rip the glands out of the revered. Also love the animation when you awaken the shells.
Yeah, those animations are sick. I love the awakening ones. Also, because we haven't specifically called it out yet, the special moves for just about every weapon have fucking mint animations on them.
The Mace's R2L2 was so good. So good. It's also just a powerful move. I was one-shotting mini-bosses with it.
I was really surprised with the visuals for this game for the team size it had. It is.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that Unreal Engine can just make such pretty things and still have them run so well.
Yeah, it does not look like a small team game at all. And that's just the power of modern day third-party engines and a good artist. They had a great 3D artist.
Just the tech stack the whole way through, not just the engines, but even just like the modeling software. Everything is just, we got into levels now where like 1 to 2 person teams can carry out what took like 20 to 30 people before, and as well as like the actual time to create these things, like the tools we have, so much of it is just, you know, automated and assisted and tool assisted, that what would take us weeks we can now do in days.
Yeah.
It's just phenomenal.
Yes, and with the coming AI changes, what is the studio size? It was like 12 or 14 people?
Look it up.
It's either 12 or 16.
Yeah,
I can't remember which.
Either way, small. And that's why the scope of the game is so small. Only 4 core people in the studio.
I was fucking wrong. Produced by a core team of just 15 people. This is from Cold Symmetry's website.
Core team of 15, okay, but only 4 real core people, according to Pookie. I don't know, we're not sure where that came from.
It was founded by 4 core people.
Okay, so 4 people founded the company, and the game was made by 15 people the company had grown to by that point.
It's, yeah, I mean, it's nuts. Like, 4, like, even just like less than 20 people. Like, you keep in mind, like, you look back to like PS2 era games, and the style, like the you know, the quality of those things, like they're good for the time, but you have to remember there's like hundreds of people. Like a typical team size was still like 40 to 50 to even hundreds, depending on like how much of the stuff was, you know, outsourced, or especially with these big studios with like multiple teams working on multiple titles at the same time. Like you can just watch the credits. Basically, you watch the credits in these things, and it's a lot of man hours that go into this. Like a lot of people spend a lot of their time on this, and now we can have like. It's amazing what we can do now with even just smaller numbers. Yeah,
well, you start watching the credits, and a lot of man hours are going to go into just watching those credits roll. There's so many people in them.
Yeah,
especially if you're looking at some of the larger AAA games,
which
aren't necessarily, you know, more high fidelity products.
No, they're not. They're just larger scope. That's the only difference. It's more high quality stuff, which is brilliant, and we're definitely going to be touching on that. Hey, Mr. Lowe, welcome. So everything in the animation is just basically good. We've got a good there. Everything looked great. I can't think of a single complaint.
Some ragdoll weirdness, but that's adding to the charm, not taking away.
Yeah, no, I count that as positive, not negative. And it's not really animation, it's ragdoll.
That's physics. Physics was hard. Sorry, a quick side note. I really, really wish that shooters would stop just doing ragdolls. I really wish they'd go back to the whole, like, some sort of animation or even like a procedural animation than ragdoll, because it's so immersion breaking when you shoot someone in a shooter game and they just like snap around everywhere and you're like, what the hell? Like, what happened? I'd rather like a death animation or something back when we had like 10 frames of a death animation, then ragdoll, or some sort of like guiding rather than you shoot them. They're like, all right, apply all bullet physics now. Let's see what happens. And I've been playing Sniper Elite 4 and I shoot someone and they just like cartwheel down the hill. I'm like, oh, okay. Oh, shooting with like a cannon? What the hell?
Do I have to keep shooting them? Hey, Val, welcome. Have you played Mortal Shell, Val? I'm pretty sure Lowe hasn't, but he should, since he's become such a Souls fan. While we're waiting for responses, let's try to keep pushing, because we're almost at 5 here and we're halfway through.
So I have some bones to pick on style.
Oh, really?
I think the game looks fantastic, but from a actually playing the video game perspective and actually being able to see things, they've shot themselves in the foot with some of their aesthetic choices. Like the consistency throughout the game is good. It can be a little difficult to tell different areas apart within the same zone. Not the biggest deal in the world, but once you get to some of the later stages in the game, notedly the obsidian area in particular, gets very, very hard to tell what's actually going on.
I found a lot of the style of the game is kind of hidden behind atmospheric fog, and it's, at least from what I've seen, it's kind of hard to me to get like a distinct idea of like the Mortal Shell style. Even if I was just to if you just Google like Mortal Shell style and look at just what the screenshots are, there is like remnants of, they have a really fresh, unique style, but it's also still hard to, compare it to a lot of other kind of games of that kind of setting and that genre of just like, we've got knights that stand in smoke.
It is very foggy, isn't it?
Yeah. So that's the main thing for me. Other than that, like I loved all the character designs. I love the set designs. It's kind of hard to see because it seems like they're hiding a lot of it, which I'm not sure if it was like an artistic choice. It could have been like a performance thing. It could have just been, maybe they didn't have the high quality assets they had at the time. It's like, okay, well, we need to, hide a bit of the detail behind atmospheric fog at first. But yeah, so I'm hoping...
I think that Fulgrim screenshot that you've got up is a good description of, or a good illustration of some of the issues that I have with it, and it's just, everything is just monochrome.
Yeah, it can be hard to tell the difference between them, I agree. But I think it's partially on purpose, or I think it's entirely on purpose.
Definitely. I think so. It was either to obfuscate originally low quality assets that they then cranked up later and it now looks great, or like they just chose to have everything be foggy and it makes the game harder to play.
I don't know if it makes it, I don't know if I found it harder due to that. I don't remember having the same issues you had with the distinguishing. Hope Deus can get a copy of the PC version of Alpha Protocol. Or is it back up on Steam again? Why would I get a PC version? I was told the PC version was crap. I was told to play it on PS3, so that's what I'll be doing. Yeah. But yeah, it gives such a bleak and dreary feeling, and I think it was more the bleak, dreary feeling they were going for in that style.
Yeah, for sure. It's just they need to balance that with usability.
That's fair.
And like I think the top rightmost screenshot in your search results there does a better job, and I mean partially because it's got the additional color from using the Great Sword's ability, but the additional color really makes it easier to distinguish things. Like you can see the torch there, the sword is glowing, there's a difference in color between the grass and the ground. The enemies are still very close to background colors, but they are more visible than they are in other locations.
Sort of bring in a couple other references for where its issues are. It's kind of got a little bit of Silent Hill, and it's got way too much Metal Gear Solid 3. Well, that's sort of where we're at. I don't know if anyone's ever tried to play Metal Gear Solid 3, but if you try to play it and you're colorblind, you can't.
Yeah, everything is the same color in that game.
I was watching a streamer I watch frequently, CarTube, try to play it, who is colorblind in ways. Not completely, but has some minor colorblind issues. And there's literally times where an enemy is standing in front of him in the middle of the screen, shooting him. And he's going, where am I getting shot from? I can't see it. Like, and all of chat's like, it's right in the middle of the screen. Like, it's that bad. It's that bad. You can snipe one of the bosses after a cutscene to avoid the fight in Mortal Shell.
I get that reference.
So do I. No, but you can't infinitely stunlock every boss in Mortal Shell, so that's fun. You have those issues as well, eh? Well, then I'm sure you're glad that we include colorblind in accessibility review. So where do you fall on style? Do you want to give it an okay then?
Yeah, I think some of what I perceive to be conscious decisions that they made hold it back from being good.
The style, you want to say something?
I think it'd be very close to a good, at least from what I saw. But there's just a few of those things where it's holding it back. But I'm excited for what the next. I'm assuming they're going to make another game, and I'm really excited.
Please make another game. We love this game. We may be ripping on the style a bit, but please make another one. It's so good.
I give style excellent. Pookie disagrees with you.
That's okay.
Enemies can be hard to distinguish from the background, and high-quality assets are not as appreciable with the fog. Game looks great. I'm gonna add that in there because it does look great. It just does. It does.
It really does.
You're in love. I'm glad. Musical score. I don't remember.
There's not a lot. And what is there is okay. It is perfectly fine.
There's no Space Country. I think that's probably our bar now.
that is the low water mark.
Yeah.
It does not enhance the experience, but it does not ruin it. Play the loot. Play the loot. That's my comment on that. Just play the loot. You'll be fine.
Yeah, the loot is probably my favorite music in the game.
So the only voice act... okay, there was the old prisoner, who was great. I loved his voice sound.
Old Prisoner is great. Merchant was creepy as hell.
Yeah, loved the merchant. I was going to bring him up next. And then the masked lady, who I think they did a great job on as well, with the audio engineering on her voice acting. And not necessarily the voice acting is great, but the audio engineering they put into the voice acting to get all the wispy effects and everything just came out perfectly for her.
If I remember correctly, she also had some weird pronunciations around things in English, which I thought was really neat.
Yeah.
Just from a stylistic point.
I agree. So I'm leaning good on the voice acting.
Yeah, the Shell's voice acting I got really into as well.
All Shell's voice acting. I don't remember the Shell's voices. When do you hear them?
Oh, really? When you upgrade it and you get the snippet of story that like reveals itself on screen as text, that is also voice acted.
Oh, the only one I don't like is the guy who says, "You bring the fog." Don't know who that is.
Oh, the fog dude in the city. Or the city, the hub. Yeah, he was. I think just like we need a character to provide the fog on off switch. So they put one.
Oh, yeah. I remember that now. Yeah.
I would say he's a little overdone as well, Pookie.
A lot of voice acting. What there is was well done. We loved the merchant. Do you remember Janessa? Is that her name?
I don't recall.
He's the stage pyrotechnician.
He turns the fog on and off.
The fog guy. Sister Janessa. I even spelt it right. Yes! The fog guy was overacted, but we can forgive. Does it still get it good with overacted fog guy?
I think so. I think it's a small blemish on what is otherwise a very, very good experience.
Good! Okay. We can't argue with Pookie.
Oh, good.
Review is done. Okay. We'll just finish putting goods. No, it is 5. It should be done. Sound effects were good.
Is there anything I can think of that was weird?
Hit sounds were great.
No. Sounds were fantastic.
Weapon sounds were great. Item use sounds were great. Boss sounds were great. Play the game.
Another one of those settings are or areas that are really important for this kind of game.
Yes.
It is such intimate combat. You really need it to sound good.
Yes, agree. And there's a ton of information relay in their sound effects. No huge... What do you mean? There's a huge poison swamp area. Right after you start, you go right. There's all the swamp paths, the frogs everywhere, poison from all the frogs.
The swamp itself is not poison. It's the frogs that poison you.
Still, you're going through a swamp and getting poisoned and slowed down in the muck and surprised by the frogs, and they're everywhere. And yeah. No.
Man, fuck the frogs.
Yeah, I'm with you. I hated the frogs. They were my least favorite enemy in the game. Every time I saw them, I was like, no, frogs! No! AI. I'm leaning okay.
Yeah, there's some weirdness around how non-bosses functioned.
Yeah.
Trash is trash.
Trash was very easy to be gamed.
It's unfortunate another one of those things that's like so important for this, and it's going to be so hard to get like that AI fidelity of games that are like Sekiro, where just every enemy it feels like an actual threat rather than something that kind of paths to you and you smack them in the face.
I mean, they still felt like threats if you don't come correct. They're not terrible.
If you're a dumbass, they will kill you.
Yeah, but like I'm saying, like when you sprint through Mortal Shell, which I've seen a few times, you ran through an area versus sprinting through an area in Sekiro, they're kind of completely different results. They'll still come after you and stuff, but like the way they kind of flank you properly and space you out and like encroach on you rather than you're just kind of get steamrolled by a mob. I think that it's that kind of level of AI where they know that they can steamroll you and wreck you, and that could be a threat in the challenge, but it's a lot more. It's still a threat when they still pace out properly and attack you and surround you and do all that fun stuff, or one will hang back and start shooting you, and that fidelity of decision making I really do appreciate. It's pretty crucial in games like this.
Or as Pookie pointed out, I like how the brigands just casually walk towards you even though you just killed their friend right beside them. There's a lot of that. They're always going slow, nothing's ever charging, nothing's coming fast, and you're just faster than them. A lot of the game is charge in, engage, run out, charge in, engage, run out, charge in, and you just, once you find a basic pattern that works, you can just stick to it for the entire game. The AI they won't adjust. Nothing behaves differently either, really. I found, like, every single enemy I approached the exact same way, for the most part.
Yeah. which makes sense for like the team of the size again.
Yeah.
At least it's still competent, still like it's still challenging AI, but yeah, AI is very hard. And it's one of those things where people don't think about it too much until they go to make their own game, and they're like, no, you gotta basically write out how things should play the game, but you can have them be way too good, way too fast. And it's one of those first things that happens when like people start learning game development and they make Pong, and it's like, well, how the hell do I make the AI? It's like, well, I just have it follow the ball, but then it's impossible to beat. I'm like, well, how do I have it fail sometimes but not all the time, so that it still feels like a challenge? And like even just a game as simple as that, the AI can be, very difficult to tune properly and have it feel like an actual proper challenge without having it feel like you're being cheated by the machine.
Big time. And we're only talking about Pong here. The AI's choices move this way, move that way.
Yeah, it's just up or down. You throw in everything else into it. AI is nuts.
Resident Evil changed your life. Yeah. Bugs. Accessibility. There's subtitles.
Yeah, there's
audio sliders. There's no colorblind.
Yeah, there's no colorblind. There are remappable controls, except for the controller, you can't remap the movement as well as the bumper actions. Other than that, you can remap everything else.
Controls on keyboard. Controller could not remap move or bumpers. Individual.
Is that true? I'm pretty sure I moved parry to LT.
It's only certain things like weapon first ability, weapon second ability. You can't remap.
Oh, weird.
I will send. I'm looking at screenshots of it right now. But the other stuff you can do. It's like the weird, like the
or some bumpers.
Yeah, it's the combo ones. It's the ones where it's multiple keys, and I guess that kind of makes sense because that can be, I guess, challenging to program rebinds for, and can be kind of messy. I don't know.
The lack of colorblind options combined with the brown-gray slathering of visuals, I think is a pretty bad combination.
Yeah.
It's going to be very difficult for some people to play, which is a real shame because it's such a great game.
And even on my very high quality monitor, with like my knowledge of color theory and the amount of time and effort I put into learning how to make things more accessible, I had difficulties with some of the colors in the games, and I don't think I'm color deficient, but I had some difficulty with it.
I don't remember having any difficulty myself, but I'm pretty visually acutive. My eyes are pretty good. I mean, I need glasses because I've been staring at monitors for 30 years, 5 inches from my face, but other than that, my eyes are sharp. Hey, house kid, going well.
I wonder how drastically different it would be on the different display types, because I feel like it's one of these games that, depending on the monitor you have, could actually really change the experience. Especially if you're running like an older 1080p and running like DVI or HDMI, one of the older standards that doesn't do like gray. It just does or it doesn't do black. It just does dark gray, and that's it. So when you have fog, you kind of just get a sheet of white or a sheet of dark gray.
Yeah. So where do we land? Are we on an okay, or is this bringing it down to bad?
I don't think it's a bad, because they do a lot of other stuff right.
It is, at least there's remappable. There is an FOV slider, I believe. Subtitles is good.
Individual volumes.
Yeah, so there is at least some stuff there, but the real big one is the colorblind mode. And I think if they had colorblind mode, that would probably push us up to a good.
Oh, it would 100% be a good. But I'm wondering if the colorblind issue is bad enough to bring it down to a bad because of the amount of impact it's going to have on the game due to their design choices in the coloring and the layout and the fog.
I think they cover enough of the other bases that it deserves an okay.
Okay. I can go with that based on the fact that most of the controller can even be rebound on PC.
Yeah, that's nice to have.
And keyboard complete rebinding. So if you're on PC, and you have issues with the controller and you can use a keyboard and mouse, you can make it work. Okay, I'm good with okay. Now this is the one you really wanted to talk about. Let's try to get through this game with enough time to still talk about Golden Sun.
Yeah, we'll see. So I have a hard time envisioning this game getting anything but a good in the mechanics category. Despite the fact that there are actually quite a few things that are not the way that I would prefer them. But that doesn't mean that I don't recognize how much effort and time they spent on tuning their combat system. Because as we were touching on earlier, the keyframing that they did in every animation in the game for your character and for quite a few enemies, the ability to harden at any point, attacking, defending, parrying, triggering an animation. Like, you can just harden whenever, wherever you want. And that makes it both an offensive and defensive tool. And that was something that took a bit of retraining of your brain when you initially start playing the game. Because you think, okay, I can harden. That lets me take a hit and I won't take any damage. That's great. But then you start playing the game a little more. You start getting a little deeper into the combat system. You start finding some heavier, slower weapons. And you realize that if you get blocked with a heavy, slow weapon, you're in real trouble. You're gonna get hit, and all the enemies do a ton of damage. So then you go, okay, well, I need to find some way to modify my attack pattern. And since you can harden in any animation, you can now modify the swing rate, which then can fake out the enemy into not being able to block your attack, and you just steamroll them, and it's so good. And that's just one mechanic that they have in the video game.
Yeah, that one
just one.
That one mechanic I think makes it a good. I do have some complaints. Like, I think they went way overboard on the iframes. Like, way overboard on the iframes, to the point where it was just too easy.
Yes, I agree. And I think the combat in general could have been sped up a bit.
Yeah, I mean, they're slow because they're going for that clunky Souls feel, and the extra iframes are there just to make it playable. I think, like, there's a lot of clunk going on in that combat, but because you've got so many iframes going on that are just allows you to do what you want for the most part when you're rolling around and dodging, it makes it very playable. I think they balanced it very well, but, you know, if you're looking for a challenge, this isn't the game. It's just not.
Yeah, it's... See, the Rubito, I respect you and respectfully disagree. The clunk is there because they didn't know quite how to tune it.
Yeah, Soulsborne combat systems are tough. They're hard to make well.
Really difficult
to make well. And when you look at the people that tried to copy Souls first, you see what happens when you're amateur and approaching these engines for the first time, looking at you, what we have already named Clunky Souls, aka Age of the Fall, or Emperor...
Lords
of the Fallen. There we go, thank you. Not Age, not Empire, Lords of the Fallen. And, I mean, it was not a good game. It was an okay game.
Lords of the Fallen is fine.
Yeah, that's what I said. It was an okay game, but it wasn't a good game. The combat was like super clunk and broken and just a pain in the ass to use. A lot of people didn't enjoy the game. Dark Souls on cough syrup. Yeah, and this is what happens when people who have never done Dark Souls combat pick up a game and try to make Dark Souls combat. Look at where Dark Souls started. Demon Souls was clunky as hell.
Oh yeah, and they kept a good portion of the clunk in the remake, and I can't wait for you to play the remake.
I can't wait to play the remake. It'll just take another 2 or 3 years for PS5 stock.
Yep.
I would never accept an offer to a Souls-like. I don't know what you mean. I assume
you mean to make a Souls-like?
Yeah, that would make more sense. The word make in there makes as a game designer. Yeah, to make a Souls-like. Gotcha.
I think as a games designer would be fun, but not as a gameplay mechanic programmer. That's a nightmare.
Yeah.
I can design the world, but if you're going to be a gameplay designer, then that's like, oof. I have been tempted, though, to try to recreate a bit of it in Unreal just to see, like, actually how messed up it would be. Because it's one of those things where you don't think it's that bad. Like, oh, you lock the camera, and then you could walk up and strafe around, but then you get to things where, like, what do you do when the camera hits the wall? What should you do with the camera? And games like The Surge just make it really bad. It's like, what's going on? What am I looking at right now? And you're like, well, we should be able to fix this. But then you go to try to do it, and it's one of those things where it's like you hit these edge cases, and then just fine tuning it, getting animation in there, and getting like, proper attacks and the proper weight, and making sure that you're not having it too fast and having it too slow. It's just such an iterative process that it takes games and games to actually start figuring out the formula, which the Soul series is starting to do. And you come fresh into the thing and you'll try it, and it's like, oh, it won't be that bad, and then you start swinging your attacks and you're like, okay, this is hard. How do I even just balance the iframes, let alone balancing swing time, damage, and all this other fun stuff.
And then sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to continue on Pseudo's point there and saying that I think the swing time is one of the things that bothers me the most in Mortal Shell. And like, I like the game. I think it's really great. I think it's an amazing first Souls-like, but the whole pace of combat is just a little bit off of what it needs to be.
Yeah.
When you're using a medium to heavy weapon, it feels like using an ultra great sword in a Souls game. Like it's super slow.
Yeah, and then that's why we have so many iframes and big lead up attacks and stuff like this, really, really good charging, like running attacks, because they needed a way to allow you to actually engage effectively. And that's the only way they could do it. And once you realize that the charging attack is the best way to engage,
good.
You just win the game after that. Like, oh, running R2, okay, I win. Bugs, I didn't hit one. I know the speedrun bugs, but those are...
There's a couple areas where in a casual first playthrough, you can get clipped into an area that you are soft locked in. You're not hard locked, you can recover, but you can get like stuck to the point where you have to give up your resources in the level.
And I also hit that one bug with the state machine where I got state stuck and I was just sliding around and couldn't attack or anything.
Yeah, that one was pretty funny.
I've seen other people report that one where they get state stuck and they can no longer perform the mechanics, or some people say harden will break for them.
Only slide. Dying fixed it. Wasn't a major issue. Still worth noting. Definitely affected my gameplay, because I was about to go fight a boss at that time. So I just kind of like floated around and watched what the boss did, because I couldn't really fight. And then the next time I came to fight the boss, I won. I'm like, well, is that a first try? So I wasn't able to attack the first time, but I did get to see the mechanics already. I'll call it a first try. First tried it. First real try.
1.5 try.
Yeah, I think that's what you said last time too. 1.5 try. I was like, yeah, that's fair enough. Fair enough. RNG, I don't think there is any.
I think there might be a little bit to the loot, just determining on whether or not you get a drop.
Do enemies even drop stuff? Oh, they do some.
Yeah. It's very rare.
But what they drop is determined by the enemy model. Otherwise, most of what you get is like, pick it off the ground, and it grows there, and it's a static recharge time and a static spawn spot.
If you can't really tell if it's there, and it is there, then that's probably good. And if it's not there, and I don't think it really needed to be there for most places, then That's also probably good.
Limited primarily to minor loot drops on trash enemies. And that's really what the RNG should be in these games. You don't want RNG in a complicated combat game where it's like, I had to push the right button at the right time to win. RNG ruins that. They're completely different mentalities. Imagine putting a chance to hit on the swing in a Soulsborne.
Well, you'd basically you'd be playing Baldur's Gate.
Would you though? Maybe Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance. Let's go with that.
Yes.
I have a better one. A chance metric on the parry. I think that would be worse than a chance on hit.
And where is pseudo?
Flat static block chance when you're holding a shield on all attacks.
That would be. Can you imagine, like, you parry, you have to get the timing, and you got to get the dice roll.
Oh, worst game ever. Control. Let's pound through Control quickly so we can talk about GBA Golden Sun. We might go a little late because we started late.
The Control, while it used a non-standard layout, even for a Souls-like, I think was fairly well done. I think the issues that I had were around the swing timing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's not Control. I mean, for the most part, it does what you want it to do when you push the button. It doesn't have a lot of assumption in the Control. So when you hit the button, it does what you wanted that button to do, not what the game decided to do at that time, which I hate. Like, to give an example of what I'm talking about here, like you're playing like a Witcher 3 kind of game or something, and you walk up to a desk with like 5 things on it, and you're trying to open the drawer beside the desk. Good luck.
Yeah, you just pick up all the items on the desk instead.
Yeah, pretty much. It's terrible. I hate that assumption of Control, where they're trying to be like, well, they're reasonably close, so let's just let it happen. But then when you're reasonably close to 5 things, what happens? There's a lot of fuzziness there, but this game didn't have a lot of the fuzziness. I think the only fuzziness of it comes from the excessive iframes and the slow combat pacing. Otherwise, the control is good.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It feels like they're using like probably Unreal Engine default stuff, and there's nothing wrong with that because it's really good.
Fuzziness, like response time. You hit the button and it does the thing. Maybe not necessarily right when you hit the button, but it'll do the thing. You can expect it to come, but it just doesn't feel sharp. Like playing Doom Eternal is sharp controls. I'm using that because you just played it. So you know, like, there's no acceleration. You move, you automatically move. You're in a very finite spot. Everything is very exact and instant. Bloodborne is good for that.
Versus playing something like Halo. Like, we recently played Halo 4, and I was immediately complaining about the fact that I literally couldn't sit still. Because as soon as you touch something, you're just like, whoa.
Yeah, a big indicator of games you find out with fuzzy controls are usually things that have like velocity accelerated motion and looking.
Okay, Velociraptor accelerated motion.
We need Velociraptor
motion.
We need Velociraptor accelerated motion now.
Oh my god.
That needs to be the next game we make. VAM. Velociraptor accelerated motion. I don't even know what the gameplay will be.
No, it's an endless runner, like the mobile games, but there's a Velociraptor chasing you.
Pookie. Oh, sorry. I was going to say, you find that a lot in third-person games, and that's sometimes due to when your character needs to turn around. They won't animation, like they'll wait for the character to physically turn around before moving in that direction, and that's kind of part of that fuzziness. Anytime you do an input, and there's a bit of delay before you actually get that motion, it's kind of that fuzziness feeling.
Yep. You get a little bit of it in Horizon Zero Dawn. Not a lot, just a little bit. They did it pretty well.
Even in the Souls games, if you do an actual 180, like if you're going forwards and then you hold back, it will cause you to do a turnaround animation before you actually start moving, and it's gotten me killed tons.
Yeah, but the turnaround animation is pretty quick. I don't find that one as fuzzy. It's just smoothed out a bit.
I hate it.
Yeah, I'm with you. Sekiro is kind of my go-to for control. For the control in an action game, Sekiro is probably the best I've ever done. That game is so tight, and if it wasn't that tight, it wouldn't be playable. Just flat out. Yeah. If it wasn't tight, it wouldn't be playable. Control scheme is fine. The control is responsive, though the excessive iframes can tend to cause some fuzziness in controls. I hate fuzziness in controls, and I still gave it a good, so that tells you how minimal the fuzziness really is. It's not actual fuzziness, it just feels like fuzziness. It's weird. And this game got 4 goods.
It's not without its flaws.
No, not at all.
But it is a very good game.
I didn't expect it to get 4 goods. I expected some okays in there.
Where would you have put the okays?
I don't know where I would have expected them to be, but I just didn't expect all goods from this game made by 15 people.
I was going to say, I think it's the scoping. It's that the quality over quantity. What is there is done good, and we can't fault it too much. It may not be a whole lot, but they did a good job on what's there.
The worst thing you can say about the game is it's kind of short. That's the worst thing you can say about it. And if that's the worst thing you can say about a game, that's a pretty damn good game.
Plus, it wasn't a full price release.
Oh yeah, right. It was only like $30-40 Canadian. Yeah, it was totally worth it. And we're always preaching scoping your projects well. Always preaching it. And this is just what I'm always talking about. It's all about your scope. Don't do too much in your product. Do what you can do well.
Yeah, if you can't do it well, cut it.
Yeah.
It's something that everyone will learn when they first start doing projects. Is you're very ambitious, and things that you think only take a day will take weeks. And then when you go to cut things, it's so hard to find what is actually important and what is not, and what to cut and what important things to actually cut. It is. Unfortunately, it is a skill that is acquired over time, but it's a very important one. You need to be able to easy to come up with the ideas. It's very hard to actually implement them well, and know which ones that actually need to be implemented.
Definitely. And you know that one, House Kid? That means you've tried to build a game before. That's what that tells me. Good done. It was a very good game, wasn't it?
I tried. I did a game jam a few years ago. We tried to build a game engine during it, which was a lot.
Was that at your birthday party? You mean that one?
No. This was the global game jam. This was at I think UBC.
Yeah,
it was like. Yeah.
Pretty sure you had an engine already for that one. That one also didn't get very far though, because that's what happens when you mix alcohol and game jam.
Yeah, that was the same engine, I believe. I think maybe we're using Godot for that. I think that was Godot we were using for that. We tried to make something else with that before, but yeah, that was. Yeah, it's hard enough to do an engine jam, let alone to actually just make the game. So anyone ever doing game jams, just use Unity, Godot, or Unreal. But use whatever will make it easiest. Don't care about quality. Just make something. That's the point of these things. Just make something. Finish something.
It's rapid prototyping. Good. Rapid prototyping is how you got to approach it. You're not making a full project. You're just making something playable. All right. Mortal Shell done. We started late. We can go a little late for this one. Golden Sun: The Lost Age. Who in chat has actually played it? I guess you could call it a mini game. It was more supposed to be a game environment, but I couldn't help but do some blueprinting. That does sound like a scope issue, though. Hey, I built the game environment and the game with it. We've all been there. So, Board, I'm pretty sure, has played Golden Sun: The Lost Age. I think everyone else just basically watched me play it.
I have played a lot of GBA games, though, so at least we'll have some input on, era of the time and how this kind of held up to the other games of its era.
Excellent, excellent. I've played the first one, which is going to be interesting as we come into the world building, because we've had to deal with this before. This game uses the same map as the previous game. It's entirely the same world. Never played it, but heard it's good. If you like JRPGs, it's better than good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's legitimately a very, very good game.
It's one of the best JRPGs I've played.
I was very impressed watching it. I'm sad I never actually got it for my GBA during that era.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah,
There's a lot of content-wise in that too.
If I would have had that game in the actual era of GBA, I would have been all about it, and I probably would have loved the GBA. Brain is all scrambled remembering it. That's okay. We'll talk about it. It'll come back.
It's using the same map or the same world isn't, or at least the map isn't always too bad. You'll notice that with Yakuza because everything kind of takes place in that same area, and you get really used to it. But every game still has a distinct world, or adds to it, or is just has its own unique take on what's going on. So it can be done, but it also depending on games, there are other games that reuse the same kind of map and world again, but don't do anything with it. They're kind of just like, we have it, and it's more of like a DLC rather than a sequel. Well, so there is that kind of bar between there.
Since it uses the same world as it's more of a part 2. I completely agree. I was actually just about to point out, Board, that while it uses the exact same map, you actually explore entirely different areas in the map in both games. Like the areas of the first game are in the map for the second game, but you never have to go there.
Really?
Yeah, I never went there.
It was in entirely different area.
Yeah, it was totally different continents, even though it was the same map.
Interesting.
And the world does change a little bit after the first game because it makes an island shift.
So I think then we need to approach it much the way we did the God of War series. And if I recall, we gave world building an okay in those. Because each of the games did add something new. They were doing new things. You weren't in the same stages. But it did lean heavily on something that had been had already been established.
This is true, and there's precedence for an okay there, but at the same time, I feel that this world is much larger and more flushed out than anything any of the God of Wars did.
I agree. But they also didn't create anything new as far as world building goes. All of the nations are the same.
As far as I know, you cannot go to any of the continents in the first game that you go to in the second game. The continents of the first game are kind of encapsulated to it. That's it. And then the world expands and you can explore sort of everywhere. I think you can see them on the map in the first game, but you can't go to them. It's strictly drawn on the map.
Right. And that's what I'm saying, is they didn't add anything new. The stages that you go to are new, but they did not add anything new to the world.
Well, is being able to enter the town and learn about new people world building?
I would say no. I would say that's more storyline and characters.
Well, that's depending on if it's like if it's building a story, then sure. But what if it's just context on the world? Like there's some places that you don't have to go to, but it just gives you a sense of what the world looks like, where the places are.
I think you can still change what's going on. I mean, like the Spider-Man games always take place in New York, but different ones build out that world differently. It's still the same, map and world and setting, but it's the actual combination of the stories and characters that kind of give it that backdrop setting of the overall big picture of what this world is.
We need some input from the chat here too. Those of you that have played it and those of you that watched me play it. I need to know where you guys land on world building. It's an important one. It's an interesting one for this game. Because they did build out the world a lot. They had to create those continents rather than just have them on a little map. Because the map you look at isn't super flushed out, if you remember. Golden Sun, the Lost Age map. That's the Lost Age map. And then there's just the Golden Sun map. Oh, this is Dark Dawn. Okay, that's a different one. Too many Golden Sun games.
Okay, so I've pulled up our original Golden Sun review, and we gave it an okay.
Okay.
Do we think that this game did a better job of world building than the previous one?
No.
Then I'd say it's probably an okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
This game takes place in the same world as the first game. It is larger, but the same map, with slight changes. Not much for new world building, but what is there is perfect for the game. Because I never felt like I wanted to know more, I needed to know more. I had the relevant information about the place, so you get context about all the places you go all the time. They're all very different. I do like that. Like, we go through oceans and caves and frozen areas and fighting Poseidon and all sorts of weird stuff.
But at the same time, it's not like, and granted, I didn't get to watch the full playthrough of this one. I was very busy at the time. But the world did not draw me in the way other games that I've watched on stream have.
Yeah. It's much more cartoony feeling to the world. I guess that's not necessarily a bad thing. You can make a good cartoony world.
I guess just shallow is the word that I would use to describe it. Not that the game feels shallow, but that the world that the game is set in is very surface level.
That's fair, yeah. There's not a lot of depth to it. Everything's very, you saw it, it is what it is when you saw it. There's secrets and stuff, but that's not world building. Characters. This is interesting because it's characters from the first game, but not the characters you play in the first game.
Yeah, I thought that was neat.
Mm-hmm. I really liked it.
It was cool that they included the characters from the previous game.
I like that going on this adventure with these characters gives you a much deeper insight into who they are. Like, I already kind of knew who they were, but now I get to really know them. The fact that you end up recruiting your other characters was kind of That didn't, we never even really used them. It didn't really matter. Kind of picked from the stuff we had from them, but I do love the fact that they're still there and you can import the characters. And I feel like both Golden Sun games are best played back to back and treated as one game.
It is a separate story, though.
It could enhance the experience a little bit because there is direct relevance between them. But if somebody played through the first one, which is a long game, and not everybody wants to do 2 JRPGs back to back, and it literally is doing 2 JRPGs back to back if you do that. I don't think you're losing anything if you wait.
I do think on topic, though, of character writing, I do think that the characters are not intended to be like super deep, super complex characters. I think they are very much intended to be sort of young adult sort of characters.
Yes.
Easily relatable.
Yep.
Sort of more simple motivations. And I think that they filled that niche extremely well.
And that's not the only characters they have. They do have a range of characters with different aspects, not just the main characters, right? Even the villains, by the end of the I don't want to give away too much, but the villains end up being extremely well written with some good depth to them. I think they deserve a good in characters.
And just checking the old review again, pulling it up.
It's probably an okay, and the characters are better in this one.
Yes, it was an okay, and from what I recall, which wasn't a huge chunk of the game, the characters did seem a bit more developed in this one, a little bit more thorough in their development. So I'm okay with giving it a good.
Our well done delivery game story delivery tools. Kind of what the characters are. Villains are very well done. No spoilers. Gotta leave it there. Can't ruin this game for people, but it's a good one. It's a good one. It's not just, aha, I'm a JRPG villain. I will foil your plans now. Aha! Because that's how so many JRPGs are written. It just gets old.
All your base belong to us.
What happened? Someone set up us the bomb! Storyline. Oh, I've already put a good there, so let's just explain why it's a good story.
'Cause it is.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil too much. The story is endearing.
It's pretty important for JRPGs, especially of this kind of stuff, where mechanically speaking, at least, it can get pretty repetitive. So you really need a good story to kind of drive you forward. And that's why games like Final Fantasy, the ones with a fantastic story, do very well. Because, you don't really mind what you're doing between those narrative elements, because those narrative elements just, reward you so much and provide you with just so much content.
Mm-hmm. Not to mention the dungeons in this game are already just so good that even if it had no story, it would be playable. Good. It's a GBA game. It plays fine. There's no slowdown. There's no issues with it. It loads fast. It's a cartridge, right? So it's just loaded.
Yeah, and Nintendo had pretty high standards for QA at that time.
We said the previous game was an okay for the same reasons. Just want to keep us consistent.
For the performance?
Yeah. Didn't do anything amazing, but it was also perfectly fine.
I guess it's
hard to. It may have just been content-wise on the screen. Maybe there wasn't a whole lot in, but I remember the art being pretty, and the effects being pretty neat for what they're doing on screen. Because I guess for performance, if they're doing basic things and it runs, then I guess that's fine. Versus doing cutting edge.
They did have a fair bit of parallax and aspect and stuff going on in the combat that ran well.
Was that any different than the first game, though?
No, but I'm thinking maybe the first game we underjudged too. I'm not beyond saying I made a mistake on a previous one. You don't mind reading a book on stream, right? Depends.
It depends if you're going to ask Deus to play a visual novel or not. My thing here is I just want to make sure that we're being consistent between our reviews.
Yep.
Because I do think that, like, in order for it to be a good in performance, previously we have approached it as it performs better than its contemporaries.
Which is why we gave Mortal Shell a good, because it just
looks locked
amazing.
100 FPS the whole time.
I don't remember much slowdown. I think we can go with an okay, but
I think another reason we gave it okay is because I think it was emulated, so it's hard to give it a
good
to kind of without actually having the hardware, because if you're using a system behind it, there could be, if there was performance issues, it could be due to the software being used to run it, as well as even just having run too well could be the product of it running on a god-tier computer for the time.
I think a perfectly fine argument is it's a GBA game that runs at GBA speeds, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I think that's a fine argument.
Yeah.
Animation.
Good.
Yeah, well, some of the summons are rehashed from the old game. There is a lot of new great animations in the game.
Yeah,
Capital
and the animations really are fantastic. Just great pixel art, very smoothly animated for what it's playing on, which is a not very complicated FPGA. Yeah, just really well done.
Depends if it's a good JRPG or not, then, Board.
Yeah, I was very surprised with it because like I've played a lot of GBA games and most of them are fairly basic.
Yeah.
They don't have a whole lot going on for them animation wise. You kind of just do your thing and they kind of just the same template follows each one. You kind of get the same kind of slightly modified animations between them, but they had a lot of fresh stuff in theirs.
Serious Sam GBA.
Oh no, no thanks.
Oh man, the enemies were literally 5 pixels. Literally.
Oh my!
When if it's a first-person shooter, when the enemy's down the hall, you're just got these like 5 pixels to shoot at. There's so few pixels, you can't even tell what it is.
I wonder how the collision even goes for that. If it's actually like pixel based or if they're actually calculating. I doubt they're calculating 3D space. So at least hopefully being able to press some of those pixels will result in some sort of hit.
There's the enemies when they get close, but where's them far away? Here. Hey.
But the resolution it would be running at.
The fact that they made this work is amazing.
There's a lot of kind of strange FPSs that were attempted on the GBA, and it's like this. I don't know if this is the console for this.
Describing this as working is a long shot, and I think Cartube might have an argument for you. Because he had to play it.
It does technically function on like a 320 by 240 screen.
I'm not sure that he was able to get through it.
Yeah, but it does function. Like, you should never do this. But it does work.
You should not do this, but it can be done. Just don't do it. Okay, style. I think it had great style. I don't think it's any different than the first game, but I still think it's good style.
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't do much different than the first game, but the quality of effects, the distinctive style of the characters, like you can tell them apart from other JRPGs on the GBA quite well. The parallax effects in battle especially were really nice.
It's a good point you brought up about being able to tell them between other JRPGs, because that's something you kind of find common, is that you only have so many pixels you're working with, so there's only so much that you can really do, and it did get really hard for people to innovate. So you kind of just see, the same template just slightly modified between games, and it's nice to see, unique games, and if there was enough pixels for a silhouette test, then it passed.
Yeah. Tell who is important at a glance.
I believe the term you're looking for is silhouette test.
What did I say?
You just said it a more roundabout way.
I meant to say if it could pass a silhouette test, if it had enough pixels to pass a silhouette test, it could.
Yeah, it's not really the silhouette test because it needs the color because it's so few pixels, but it allows you to see who is important at a glance. Characters, environments, and spells all looked great. Everything fits and feels cohesive despite going to so many disparate environments. Spent 3 hours carrying wood. Yep. I've done that before too. Can be tiring. It's all worth it when you light that wood fire though. think the musical score was good. Did we give the first one a good?
We sure did.
Loved the music. Amplified the game. No pun intended on the amplified for the music.
There is something special about that just era of, heavily restricted scoreable music when they just only had so much to work with. For some reason, they just
got to make what you have count, right? Got to make what you have count. Quality over quantity.
And then now we have, I guess maybe now since it's just so overwhelming the possibilities, I guess it's harder to really get there. But man, even just like NES era stuff, even all the way back then, like the tracks, there's not much to them, but just what they are is just, it still lives up to today.
We gave the last one a bad for voice acting too, didn't we?
We did not.
An okay?
Yep.
I think I wanted to give it a bad, and you guys argued me into an okay then.
Yeah. It's because of the limitations of the platform, right? Like having actual voice acting on the GBA is nigh impossible.
Yeah.
And with what they were working with those cartridges, they just didn't have the space for it.
Totally
I would
agree.
say
but
voice acting is okay, not applicable.
My view on it is still that hardware agnostic, the game would have just been so much more playable if it was red. There's a lot of reading in the game.
See, I disagree. I find in a JRPG or something story-driven, I read faster than the voice actors speak. So
That's
if
fair.
I'm not on stream needing to read something, I skip a lot of voice lines unless I really like that voice actor.
That's fair. That's fair. I am taking it from a streamer's perspective where I had to read every line to you guys. That was onerous on the vocal cords.
Yeah, you essentially voice acted the entire game.
Yeah. I was even doing voices and stuff. That fried my throat. There is no voice acting on the GBA. It's fine. Sound effects. They were good to okay. Streaming it and voice acting. Yeah, I read the entire game. Both of them. That's why when I did Final Fantasy VI, I did it on weekends and casual and nothing promised. And sometimes I just leave it up long enough for you guys to read it. Hit okay, like whatever, you can read it. I don't care.
It's a lot of text.
Yeah. But yeah, sound effects. Was the last one good?
It was.
Then this one's good too.
I would say, notedly, they did a great job with state information.
State information through sound?
Yeah. I'm thinking now, like, did different weapons have different attack effects in sound? And I honestly don't remember.
Pretty sure they did.
I don't know. I didn't play the game.
They definitely amplified the experience of the game. It's just a better game with sound. 100%. AI. I think it was actually pretty good if I remember. Bosses were good. They had a wide variety of attacks. They changed it up constantly.
I think changing it up is probably the really important thing when it comes to JRPGs. Once you can find patterns, then you can really exploit them. But as long as you can't find those patterns too easily, then that's a good indicator of it being, well done.
Yeah, the bosses were a series of decisions rather than continuing a party pattern. That makes sense.
It wasn't just a stat check.
Yeah. Yeah, you had to actually try. Which is also mechanics, but the combat did not feel flat or predictable. You needed to analyze and respond in combat rather than just follow your pattern. Because that's a lot of JRPGs I play, you get your good heal, you get your good damage spell, and for the rest of the combat you just spam A with memory on and spam heal every turn with your healer and attack your best attack every turn with your attacker and this and that. But we'll talk about it more on the mechanics, how the game really breaks up the phases that way, but you need to be making decisions on every single turn. What did we give it before in accessibility? Okay or bad?
Okay. The only thing we called out on the previous game was that control rebinding would be a nice to have. And it was the same. It's the same game.
I mean, it's a JRPG. It's pretty accessible. Nothing's real time. You could theoretically play it with 2 pinkies on the thing if you wanted, just fine. Mechanics were good.
Yeah, I liked the depth of the summon system.
The genie system.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very, very cool. Every time you summon, you're spending your genies, which reduces your stats and takes time for them to reappear. You become stronger as you do. The spells you have access to change depending on which genies are active. And I didn't get much into it. I stayed very narrow on my elements. But you can start mixing and matching elements on characters in crazy, crazy ways. And once you do that, using your genie ability to unready it and have it be ready for summon is just... I don't even know how to explain it.
It's super neat. It's a cool combat system.
Yeah, you can change your entire skill loadout just by using an ability.
It's nice they don't force you to go into the more in-depth parts of it too. You can kind of just use as much of it as you want.
Agree.
And figure it out that way, and not just be like, they don't skill check you where all of a sudden you're like, well, this boss, you're going to have to figure out the entire depth of the mechanics. It's kind of like, no, they're there if someone really wants to go through and explore that and have full control of the, what's going to happen and just really dive deep into that system. Or they can just, use what they can find, what they need to get the job done.
Big agree. If they really pushed the mechanic system to the point where if you don't deeply understand it, you're dying all the time, it wouldn't have been a fun game. It would have just been onerous to play. It would have been a chore. Not
because it is quite complicated.
Yeah. Fantastic the way they have been used. They are very deep and allow for massive variance in builds, but are not required, and thus the game does not become onerous to play. Is that spelled right?
Typo and variance.
Thank you. And that's a good. Okay. Bugs. Good. No bugs encountered in casual play. RNG, good. It is a JRPG. It uses a lot of RNG. It never dictated the outcome of battle. That's the key thing in JRPG. There's RNG everywhere in JRPGs, but the battles were decided by my skill. There was never losing a battle to RNG.
Which can be a fairly difficult thing to do if you don't think through your systems well.
Yes, very, very easy to do. JRPG combat is harder than people give it credit to do. It can become very schloggy, like just a grind really quickly. And this game was never a grind. And that's a lot of care and attention on the balancing of the game. your natural encounter rate was enough to level you to be at the right level for the areas as you go to them, so that they will be challenging but not impossible. So you can grind and are encouraged to grind to make the game easier if it's challenging, or you can just play through it in a casual straight play if you're a really good JRPG player like I am and are just willing to take on the challenge that it's throwing at you. I did the first game that way too. The only boss that killed me in the first game was the last. I had to go get more powerful for. That was it.
Which, I mean, is on one hand kind of cool, but on the other hand, like, why ramp the difficulty there?
I don't think it was a ramp of difficulty. It was a fairly smooth ramp. I saw it getting harder and harder and harder as I went. And when I went back and got all the items I had missed, it was back down to the difficulty of everything else, and I just smashed it.
Right, but that still implies that there was a fairly steep ramp up in the final area / boss, because you made it all the way to the final boss without those items. And then you needed them for the final boss.
Yeah, I was struggling through every combat in the final boss's area too. Like it was clear that things had been stepped up, and it wasn't like I'm losing. It was just I have to try a little bit harder now. And then the try a little bit harder when I got to the last boss was just that much harder that I couldn't do it. But I did miss like a quarter of the genies in that game. So when I went back and got them all to put my stats back up to where they should be, I was just like, oh, okay, I rule now. I am the king. And I just trashed them. But I like losing in a JRPG once in a while. It's not very often a JRPG kills me in a way that I'm like, oh, I need to get stronger. It's usually just, oh, I didn't use this. I should equip that item and then I'll win. That's usually what they end up being. We gave the last one good for Control.
We actually gave it an okay. Based on our notes last time, there were a couple of functions that we would have liked to have mapped to additional buttons.
But we don't have additional buttons.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. The game controls well for a GBA. You won't have issues with standard gameplay, but it is not very convenient with only 2 buttons. And again, it's all good still. It's still 4 goods. Yep. It's significantly more yellow. Significantly more yellow than the previous game, but it's still a good game. And I personally...
it's actually not.
No, the previous game as in Mortal Shell. Oh,
yes. Not the previous game in the series.
Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah. You see, Mortal Shell got 4 OKs and this one got 5. We reviewed a couple of really good games today. And yeah. I think I would put Golden Sun's genre as transcendent. I think it's that good. I think I would still recommend, like, even if you're not a big JRPG fan, if you really like a good story, it's still going to be a good game. It's totally playable. Yeah. And an absolute must play if you're a JRPG fan. If you are a fan of JRPGs and you haven't played this, you're doing yourself a massive disservice.
And still just a huge fan of both the level and puzzle design in both of the Golden Sun games.
Yeah, we didn't touch on it when we were talking about mechanics, but man, the puzzles. If you like puzzles in your JRPGs, I know of none better. Yeah, I know of none better. I know of none better. It's on par with Lufia 2, which is a total hidden gem, and you probably don't know Lufia 2. Play Lufia 2 for the Super Nintendo. It too has immaculate level design and puzzle design. By the time you finish the first dungeon, you've missed 3 things.
I feel like this game actually approaches like Link to the Past level puzzles at times. Like they are quite good.
I think Lufia 2 is better than Link to the Past for puzzles.
I haven't played it. Couldn't tell you.
Yeah. I think this one is too, honestly. This game's puzzles were great. Great. I'm very familiar with Link to the Past, by the way. Just so everyone knows. I have finished that game a fantastic number of times. I used to do 100% items in one sitting regularly. I miss Link to the Past.
It's a great game.
It is a great game. I can't play it anymore.
No, not gonna do it. Not for old time's sake.
Makes me miss my old cartridge.
Yeah, fair enough.
I had 2 copies of Link to the Past stolen. I can't play it anymore. Of course, I did finish it, like I said, like 100 times when I had the SNES cartridge. Back when it was new, and I loved my SNES. In fact, to end it all off with a hilarious story, one of my 100% item runs in one sitting, it was like late afternoon. I woke up fairly early, started playing. It was like late afternoon time. I was 1/4 heart piece away, and I think I needed the cloak in the hills. And that was it. What do you guys think of the third Golden Sun? I haven't played it yet. Have not played it yet. I've played the first 2. That's it. I look forward to playing it. How's it going, Elkin? Welcome. I loved the first 2, though. But yeah, so I'm 1/4 heart piece away. I'm working my way to that heart piece. Maybe 1 cape away. It's probably like 20 minutes time to get those 2 items left before I go and fight Ganon. And then our dog, bless her heart, saw something out the window and decided to start barking. And then run! Well, good old SNES cable, the controller got wrapped around her foot, the second player controller, as she took off and ripped the Super Nintendo out of the wall. Like, the cables were just left behind. I actually broke my power adapter on it too. I had to fix the power because it was loose afterwards. Pulled the insert of the power out. And then maintained connectivity to her leg and followed her out the back door and down a flight of stairs and around the 3/4 acre backyard a couple times before I reclaimed my SNES from the dog and brought it upstairs and plugged it all in and turned it on, and it all still worked! Except my save was gone.
Yeah, but the save file's gone.
Yeah, it wiped my save out when it did it. Reset the battery. I could still save moving forward, but it bounced the battery enough that it reset my save.
I too have a tale of incredibly strong Nintendo hardware. I lost my Game Boy Pocket back in the day. Outside. In a field. In October. I found it next May. It still worked. It was fine. Need new batteries, but it was fine.
For the record, that's 7 months outside.
In Canada. In winter.
It saw some things. It experienced. It was definitely weathered.
Yep. Weathered is a good word for it. So
I actually still have it. It's on my shelf over there.
Awesome. Does it still work?
Yeah, it still works just fine.
Awesome. I love it. I forgot my GBA was in my pocket when I went to the beach, and the tide came in as I slept on the beach. My GBA had a sea salt bath and still works. That's amazing.
That's pretty incredible.
Salt water is, if it still works after salt water, then that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, if salt water doesn't kill it, nothing will, because that should corrode every single line in that thing instantly. Time for games, time for food.
Oh, and game giveaway, though.
Oh, game giveaway. Yeah, screw them. All right. Let me put it up. Let me pull it up. We'll definitely, or not definitely, but hopefully play games later. Hopefully, I'd love to get some.
While Deus is working on that, I have another tale of incredible Nintendo build quality.
I was just in the process of saying hopefully games later. Maybe Risk of Rain.
Yeah, we could do that. We can do something that'll little workout for your mouse. The new one.
Yeah. All it's had is Factorio.
But so everybody remembers the old like square CRT TVs, right? Like if you're lucky, you had one that was like maybe 24, 30 inches.
Yep.
And they weighed like 100 pounds.
Oh, yeah.
I dropped one of those on an N64. The N64 was fine, and it broke the casing on the TV.
Yeah, level shit.
That's impressive. That's impressive. Oh, I forgot I added Risk of Rain 2 to the game giveaway.
Great game.
Sure is.
I mean, we're up to what, like 280 hours in it? Something like that?
Yeah.
I don't know, let's check it out.